Welcome to the Big Three, where we get to talk about this week's sermon from North Boulevard, Church of Christ in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We're going to take questions, make observations from you and me and Daryl. And this week's special guest, you guys don't know this guy at all, John Magnuson.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. You know, it's always fun to get to sing, do the old job for a Sunday. I get to do about once or twice a year.
And then you did some running. You just ran down here. You were fast.
I sprinted
People
right on
probably
down here.
wanted to talk to you. You were like, can't talk.
Well, there's so many people on vacation. There's nobody in the aisle.
It made it easy to just zip right through.
Okay, so we're on week 5 of Audacious Identity. Okay, just trying to summarize. Well, I don't know if I can summarize that, but let's say, the thing that hit me most, I have been singing since a child, Trust and Obey.
Yes.
And I think I'd heard the story of how it started before, but I'd never heard it put in the context of Joshua.
Absolutely.
Trust and obey. Do you know that if I have to walk around yelling at a building,
for a week,
I'm going to feel, I'm not going to, I'm going to feel kind of dense. I'm not going to wonder, I'm going to wonder, I'm not sure I'm going to think I'm doing God's will.
Yeah.
And sometimes God's will doesn't always make sense to us. There's a reason why he has us do what we do.
That's right.
And sometimes I can't help but wonder if it's just to see if we're really willing to obey.
Yeah.
And to trust.
Yeah.
You know, it did strike me as you were just saying that in this story, it is clearly God who did the fighting.
Oh,
you
yes.
know, because,
there's no
what you
question.
said. They're just walking around shouting at a building, and then boom. That happened. Well, that's only God does that.
Trust and obey. So that's your takeaway, is sometimes it doesn't make sense.
Sometimes, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. I don't, you know what? I'm going to tell you now, if I could understand everything there is to know about God, he wouldn't be much of a God.
That's
right.
That's exactly right.
That's
the
right.
very fact that I cannot understand him is what elevates him.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. That's so good. What about you, John?
Well, I got lots of notes, but I have a couple of things in bold. I like how the slide he had. Trust is to accept God's way even when it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I think you have to grow into that. You know, and I guess that's what he was doing in the 40 years before they ever got to Jericho. He was helping them grow into this idea of trust me. I know this doesn't make sense, but neither did the manna, and neither did, all those other battles you won that you shouldn't have won.
Yeah.
None of that made sense without me, and so he was teaching them to trust.
I appreciate that he said trust and adjust, too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you do feel like, okay, this feels like this is what I'm called to do, and then it's not easy, and then you think, well, I guess I got it wrong. Wait a minute. This may also be part of it. Because, I think of it specifically for our family when we were bringing home our youngest son. It took us 4 years from when he became legally ours to bring him to the United States. And there were plenty of times during that time where Brent and I would look at each other and go, did we misunderstand what God called us to do?
That's right.
But now that he's been home for almost 10 years, it's like this was a plan. And this was an adjustment for bad things that had happened to our son to not have parents in the first place. It wasn't like, so I'm not trying to make it sound like we came in and fixed it. We were just marching around that city, not really knowing what we were supposed to do, but we were just trying to obey a calling. But, you have to adjust, and you have to just keep trusting and obeying, and trust some more and obey some more. It's hard.
Which is all about trusting and adjusting.
Yeah.
I have 2 axioms that I've come to believe. These are the 2 truest things. I'm sure there are more, but these are what come to mind. Skid's thing about who you are who you hang around. I think that's just axiomatic.
We say it at our house at least once a week.
Yeah. And my other one is God's always doing something a lot cooler than I think he is. So even when I think I know his mind, as you said, you can't quite ever pull that off. But every time you think you do, you step back, give enough time, you realize, oh, that was even better than I even dreamed.
Absolutely.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So that's what God does.
So good. The one other thing I was going to share was he talked about how God's message and nature is consistent, and kind of went back to that, at the very end of what we read today, where Joshua said, do not rebuild the city. If you rebuild the city, the cost of rebuilding it will be your firstborn. And my husband, Brent, he had a footnote, and he flipped over to 1 Kings 16, and the man who rebuilt it, his first son was killed. Oh, wow. So there's a consistency to God that sometimes we're not comfortable with, but that's what we can plant our feet on. There is a consistency that we can trust. And so, Glenn talked about, keep the walls down because he's talking about walls that are not just like protective walls, but he's talking about walls that are strongholds that keep God out. And so when Joshua said that, that was like kind of a curse. We don't feel comfortable with curses, but it was a curse, and it came true all those generations later, like in Elijah's time in 1 Kings 16. So it's consistent.
Very true. So I'm not getting political.
Okay.
But I'm going to say one of the things that we as a group need to do is pray God into the schools.
Yes.
We need to do that.
Oh,
we need to do
Absolutely.
that. Pray Him into the schools.
Yeah, I did have one thought I wanted to share. In Celebrate Recovery, we talk about time in terms of minutes, hours, and days. And we also talk about how hard it is to reset the clock. And so, when you've basically, God has knocked down a stronghold in your life, it's so hard to see myself or anybody else just walk back into that stronghold.
Oh, absolutely.
And just completely reset the clock and start the stronghold all over again. But He's always faithful. He's always there. So even in those cases, He's back and He's walking with us again. But it just made me think of that as you talked about
the stronghold.
The barriers that keep God out, whatever our stronghold might be. It stinks when you have to reset the clock. It's no fun at all, but it happens.
Because you guys celebrate in Celebrate Recovery. You celebrate how many months sober or whatever it is.
Exactly
So that's kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I'm thankful for the programs there.
Absolutely. Well, great job. We really learned a lot today from this in Joshua 6. It was so good.
If you have more questions, let us know. Use the QR code on the screen.
And if you want to rewatch it, I've already watched it twice today.
Oh.
Or maybe you want to watch it for the first time. You can find that at boulevard.to/sermons. Well, guys, that wraps up this week's Big 3.
That's right. Thanks for being with us. Look for this podcast on your favorite platforms and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big 3.